Hey guys, welcome to PB Garage. Today I'm going to show you how to diagnose that pesky clunking noise in the front of your smart 451. Now if you've had a 451 for any amount of time, you probably know what I'm talking about. It happens a lot. You're driving along and over time, things start to wear out, and especially over like speed bumps, things like that, slow bumps, you get a clunk clunk, or over bigger potholes, or any time that the suspension is unloading, you get a clunk. And there's a whole bunch of different parts that can actually cause that noise. So we're gonna take a look at everything, and I'll show you guys how to pick out what the issue is, and then we can talk about different ways to solve the problem. All right, so I've obviously got my 451 jacked up here, wheel off so that we can have a look at all the suspension components. Now, the first thing you're probably gonna wanna check, if you haven't replaced these already, is your sway bar bushings. So right in here, there's a bushing. This is your front sway bar, and these bushings often wear out. And spoiler alert, in the case of this car, this is the issue. How do I know? Well, if we grab that sway bar and give it a little tug, there's a whole bunch of play. And if we look right in here, you can see that sway bar is just floating in that bushing. So in my case, easy diagnostic there. Other issues that you can come across, these sway bar end links can go bad. So this bolt up here can get loose and that sway bar end link can start to rattle. It's got a couple of ball joints on it. Those can go bad as well. So you'd have to replace that sway bar end link. Another place that can be an issue, and I've had to deal with this a few times, you can see on this car, the bushings on the control arm on the inside here, this one's starting to sneak out a little bit. These are starting to go bad. I've had to replace a few of these and they cause that clunk as well. Here's the back one. Now that issue with those bushings, fairly easy to solve. You can buy the bushings individually, take this control arm off and press the bushings out and press new ones in. But I've found it easier just to order a complete unit, because another source of that clunk can be the ball joint at the end of the control arm here where it goes into that knuckle. So if you buy a whole control arm with new bushings, new ball joint on the end, replace that whole unit, very easy. Now I have another video on the channel that goes into depth on how to disassemble the whole front suspension here. So I'm not gonna talk too much about that, but just to know where the problem issues are. Obviously, tie rod ends can be an issue too. This can get loose. That's typically not gonna give you a clunk over bumps. It'll give you a clunk as you're turning the steering wheel. Sometimes it'll give you a clunk in one direction than the other. So check those as well. You can just grab the end and give it a tug there. Now another really common area on these guys is the springs, and the spring bearing up in the top goes bad, and the bushing on the top of that as well. So this spring here obviously is intact, and if we have a look up here, you can see where that cup is, and I can show you guys actually. I have the parts right here. There's a rubber bushing that sits up in the top, and a little bearing cup there that sits on the top of the strut as well. So they're up there. In the case of this one, you can see turns freely, no problem. What happens is that bearing seizes up there. So if you go and check this and this is seized, what'll happen is it'll actually snap the top of the spring off or the bottom of the spring, and then you've got a broken spring and another source of that front end clunk. Now in just a second, I'll go to a different car that has broken springs and we can have a look at that. But just before we do, I wanna go back to these bushings. If we have a look on the other side of this car, we can see I've replaced this control arm already, so those bushings are good. But the way that would show up, if we had the wheel on here and you give the wheel a pull and push forward and back into the car on both sides at the same time, you'll get a bit of a clunk in that direction. So again, checking that front spring, check that perch, everything's spinning freely, so we know that that's not an issue with this one. Now I'll take you guys out to another car and show you some broken springs. Now this is a parts car that's been sitting here for a little bit, but it does have broken front springs. Now the easiest way to tell is you see how close that tire is to the front guard. If it's up right close to that guard or even inside the guard, good chance those springs are broken. Another way to tell, if you're turning the steering wheel and you hear like a clunk, 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 or a pop, pop, pop as you turn the wheel, going from, full lock to full lock, another good indication that that bearing in the top of the strut has seized and now you've probably got a broken spring. So I'm just gonna jack this car up here real quick so that we can have a look. Now with that front tire just barely off the ground, you can see and hear, pretty easy to spot. I mean, there's the bottom ring of that spring. You can see the spring's shot past that. So that bottom ring is broken off, and the spring's kind of gone for a little excursion down towards the wheel there. But I'll pull this wheel off so we can actually get a closer look. Okay, now with that wheel off, you can see it's very obvious, broken spring here. Still under compression a little bit, but it's hung up on that ear where the sway bar end link attaches. So this one up at the top, totally seized. And often I'll see them not break necessarily at the bottom here. They'll break right at the top, and you'll get like a ring just hanging out here, a piece of the spring that breaks off and just kind of hangs out in here or falls down to the bottom. Or I've even had one fall down into the brakes and get wedged in there and make a whole racket while you're driving down the road. So, you know, there's lots of ways that these fail. But broken springs on these, because of that bearing going bad at the top, pretty common. So definitely check that out if you got a clunk in the front end, along with, as I say, the sway bar bushings and your control arm bushings and ball joint. So there you go, guys. Pretty much everything that can go wrong in the front end of your Smart 451, giving you that clunk over bumps. Like I say, I do have a video explaining the disassembly and reassembly of the whole front suspension on the channel. So if you guys are going through and you find an issue with one of the components, go check that video out. I think the only thing I may not have covered in that is the sway bar bushings. So I'm going to tackle those on this car right now because that's part of the issue that this car has. It's a really simple process. If you guys are interested in that, stick around. If not, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys the next time. Okay? Have a good one. All right, so to get at these bushings, super simple. Just grab yourself an 18 mil wrench. You're gonna come in here, get on that nut, turn that guy out. And once you've got that guy loose, you can just pull that nut right off. And with that nut off, this like clamshell here should just be loose, and you can flip that front half of that clamshell out. Lots of play in the control or the sway bar there, so you can get both sides, both halves I should say, of your clamshell out, and then you can just pull that bushing off. And then I've got a new set of bushings here from Tech, brand new bushing. Now, I'll be completely honest with you guys. I know that if I had polyurethane bushings, you're supposed to put some dielectric grease or something on there to kind of lubricate it. I'm not sure if you do that with rubber bushings or not. I feel like with rubber, you're supposed to just put them on dry. But if you guys know better, by all means, please let me know in the comments. So we just pop that guy on, put the back half of our clamshell back in here, and the front half. And I'm just gonna put a little dab of anti-seize on my threads there, just to make me feel better about myself. Put that nut back on and tighten it down. Now, I'm gonna tell you guys, I don't know what the torque spec is on this. I'm gonna tighten it down to what feels right to me. If you guys have a good feel for that, go for it. If you're not sure, by all means, the Google button will help you find the answer. I am certain. Now, if you guys remember how much play was in that bushing, it was going clunk, clunk, clunk at the beginning of the video. Now it's nice and tight. So I'm gonna do the bushing on the other side and call it a day. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.